Hey, greetings. Thank you for being present. I'm grateful for you. My name is Philip Daniel Miles. I'm here today as an astrologer to talk to you about my favorite timing technique, the progress chart. The progress chart is a technique which I learned about 7 years ago, and I studied it and practiced it with myself before now having used it with clients in a very beneficial manner for quite some years. This very useful and exciting technique is where we see that we have our natal chart. Of course, our natal chart is the greatest moments in our life, and it is also our most challenging moments in our lives. And so we can see that we're always gifted the opportunity through the transits in application to our natal chart to raise the vibration, to lift our frequency of our old stories, to see through our old belief systems and to heal some of the old shadows. This is why we're here in the earth realm. This is why we're here in this life, to be able to go through our old stories and lift ourselves up with the love. This is the greatest gift that we can offer ourselves. And so through the lens of astrology, it's very practical, it's very useful. And this technique, we actually see that the evolution of a chart takes place within a Fibonacci spiral. You can see that this takes place like the evolution of cycles, because it is that through every 7 years, we have a Saturn square, and this is a Fibonacci golden mean ratio. And so this is how we plot the progress chart. Once every annual cycle of a year, the sun in the progress chart will move and develop 1 degree of the chart. So for instance, if you're born at 0 degrees of Aries and you're 10 years old, your progress chart, your sun, will be at 10 degrees of Aries, because it would have progressed 10 degrees in the 10 years of your life. And so this is really beneficial for us to learn through, especially when you consider that when you reach 30 years old, your sun is actually going to change sign. You're going to progress from an Aries sun ruled by Mars to a Taurus progressed sun ruled by Venus. Not only this, but our moon progresses also 13 degrees for every year. So as the sun moves 1 degree, the moon also shall move 13 degrees, because we have 13 lunar cycles within a year. Now, if you know your astrology, you will know that we have a moon, which is our nearest luminary, that represents our feelings. It represents our emotions. It rules Cancer. And so it's our nearest luminary. It's our nearest satellite, if you will, to time things upon. We have a lunar cycle which lasts 28 days. Every 28 days we'll have a new moon or a full moon, depending on when you start counting, I suppose. Right now, we have our 3rd quarter moon of a lunar cycle that began back in Gemini. Right now, the moon is in Aries, and it's in a conjunction with Chiron, while squaring the sun back in Cancer. So this is a 3rd quarter moon. And so this is something that we can be aware of with regards to learning which part of our cycle we're born into. We will come back to this. However, if the chart's progressing onwardly, this means that also our ascending sign is also going to be progressing onwardly. Eventually, over the course of about 20 years, we shall find that our ascendant changes. And these points happen at very, very important parts of our lives. They happen at very, very subsequent moments of our experience. I found out about this technique 7 years after my ascendant had changed from Libra, which it is in my natal chart, to Scorpio. And so when I look back on that time, when my ascendant changed, I can see that that was a massive shift in the development of my consciousness. That was a massive time in changing the page, changing the script with regards to what I was placing my attention on and identifying with. And also, if the ascendant changes, because we use a whole house signs chart divination, what we will see is that all the houses shift by 30 degrees. And so all of the planets in the houses shift by 30 degrees when our ascendant changes. So this is quite a complex technique, but it's very practical, very beneficial. And I'm going to show you a few examples today. We're going to go through an example of the Great Conjunction and how that chart progresses, just as our first example. And then as our second example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a choice that you're going to choose. Are we going to look at Leonardo DiCaprio's progress chart? Or are we going to look at Uma Thurman's progress chart? You in the live chat, you guys, you and you're going to choose. And so whoever I'm going to scan in the chart in a minute after we've done the first example, I'm going to scan the live chat. And whatever looks to be the most, whoever gets the most votes, whether it's Uma Thurman or whether it's Leonardo DiCaprio, we will look at their progress chart and how these cycles play out as an example. And then what we're going to do is take a deep dive into Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's chart, because he has a very interesting shift in his chart. In fact, he has a full moon and Libra. He's a Libra ascendant and a Taurus sun, but his Venus goes retrograde on the full moon in his progressions. So we're going to look at that too, because it's a very fine example of the value of these experiences that we live through. And so we're not going to personalize these archetypes, these particular people and what they're doing and their status and status in the world. That's a political thing. These are astrological examples. And so thank you for your presence. We're grateful for all of you. I see someone's already voting for Uma Thurman. So Uma's winning at the moment. Who's going to go? Nobody knows. Contribute your votes. You are appreciated. But this is a discounted offer for you now that we have available for the next 2 weeks. So from now into the Cancer lunar cycle, which we will do a video about that new moon in Cancer next week, on the third quarter moon of that cycle, which is in 2 weeks from now until then, you have the opportunity to invest in a discounted offer for this progress chart reading. It is actually that you can have a look at the immediate future of your progress cycle. So if you're born, for instance, on a new moon, you know that in your progress chart, you will have a full moon at the age of 14. And then you would have had a new moon at the age of 28. Because the moon, the nearest archetype, simulates Saturn, the farthest archetype in the progress chart cycle. Saturn takes 28 years around the whole sky. So just as when we have our Saturn return, we are also having our progressed moon return to its phase, that which we were born in also. And so this is very important for learning which phase we're born into and how that progresses with regards to our own personal cycles. It's a bit like being a musician, playing in an orchestration. Because if you're playing in an orchestra, you need to know the beginning of the song and the end of the song, so you know where to come in and how to play your instrument. And so when we know what we've grown through astrologically and how the chart's progressed through this time, we're able to then look forward to the future. I mean, the title suggests it's all about the future, but what is most healing and beneficial, I find, with my clients, is that actually when we look at revised experiences with conscious, mature eyes, we can look back at trauma, maybe a divorce. Maybe it was our parents that got divorced. That's what happened to me at the age of 6. I mean, it happens to a lot of people, right? That's when I had my progressed new moon at the age of 6. That's 28 years ago, actually. I have a progressed new moon on Monday, this Monday, 7 years after I found out about this technique. We'll even look at my chart at the end, but we'll keep that right to the end because this is a demonstration. We're going to use world-renowned archetypes to be able to show how this technique works for us. And so if you already know which lunar cycle you're born into and you are able to do some maths, you might be able to work out where your progressed moon is. You can even find that you can have a reading with me at the discounted rate to get a 1 hour synthesis of what's going on, the cycle you're born into and how that's matured into the future. But if you wanted to really go deep, if you really want to go into a healing process and have me hold space while we walk through as an astrological guide and walk through how the progressed moon has gone and aspected each and every one of your other natal positions and how they've progressed through the 28 years, through maybe the 60 years of your life. This can be the most valuable and healing investment that you actually partake in. This can be like hours and hours of psychotherapy, because the astrological reading is a quantum leap in our conscious development. It's a very much evolution at raising the frequency of the archetypes, and it's very, very beneficial for us, as you shall see through these examples. So if you want to book a reading with me, if you want to make that investment in yourself, all of the information is in the description box below on the discounts that are available for the next 2 weeks for you. And I'll be very excited to connect. All of the consultations that we share are done on Zoom Messenger, which means that we record the interaction as well as the shared chart on the screen. So this is very beneficial for your later review in your own personal time, because you can play it back and you'll even remember other things that we don't mention in the conversation that we share. So thank you for your presence. Some people were saying DiCaprio, Uma seems to be winning. There's a couple of DiCaprios, there's a few Umas. I'll keep my eye on that, but come back to it. And so let me share my chart. Well, not my chart. Let's share the chart of the Great Conjunction. Only happened 6 months ago. It's just an example, because we just needed something mundane to be able to tap into for our first example. And so that's what we're going with. And here we are. Let me just get this up on the screen. I'm grateful for your presence. I'm excited to share this expose, if you will, on this experience of the progressed chart, the most valuable timing technique that I have stumbled across in astrological experience that I've had. And so this is amazing. This is the chart of the Great Conjunction, where Saturn was overtaken by Jupiter. This happened only 6 months ago on the winter solstice, right? Depending where you are in the world, it would have happened on different dates. But if we move this chart forward a whole year, then it's actually going to be in the future from where we are, because this only happened 6 months ago. But it's a good example. As you know, this happened on the winter solstice, so you can see that the sun is at 0 degrees of Capricorn up here in the 11th house. And you can see also that the moon is down here in Pisces, 27 degrees. It's actually a first quarter moon of a cycle that began in Sagittarius. And so this is very important to be aware of if we were looking at the psychological development of ourselves, or even a business. This can be very good for business if you're a long-term business owner. For instance, if you've had a business for 30 years or more, you can look at the whole cycle of your progressed moon and how the business has developed. You know that actually the critical maximum point of growth would be with the full moon, and then you have to maybe cut some losses. You might have to let some people go, maybe let some of the projects go, and that could be very beneficial for the project's profits. The same is with our investments, with our relationships in different areas of our lives with regards to the likeliness of this cycle. And a key feature about this is we must remember the moon rules Cancer. So in whichever chart we look at, there's a predominance of a feature with regards to Cancer, which the moon rules, which in this chart is the 5th house. But we're not going into the details here, it's just the technicalities, right? And so if I move this chart forward 1 year, it will be the 28th of December 2021, a few days after the winter solstice this year. It will actually be, by transit, the day that Jupiter goes back into Pisces. But that's not our point here. You're going to see that the sun moves to 1 degrees of Capricorn, and you're going to see that the moon shall move 13 degrees along, which should mean it's about 9 or 10 degrees of Aries. Let's take a look. Let's progress this chart. There you go. We have the sun at 1 degree of Capricorn. You see Mercury's also moved along. It's shuffled along a little bit, has Mercury. And also Jupiter has moved over Saturn. It's moved beyond it, as has the moon moved from the 1st house into 9 degrees of Aries. So let's just move this chart forward a whole 30 years. Imagine now that it's not the mundane chart for the Great Conjunction. The synthesis of that chart is not the status that we're having a look at. You can see here that at 10 years into the progression of this chart, the ascendant shifts. So this means that the sun and all of the houses shift. The sun will move into the 10th house. Here we go, boom. And so the sun's now in the 10th house. We have an Aries ascendant for the chart. This means the chart ruler is different. The midheaven has shifted into the 10th house. The midheaven's ruler is different. So if you're thinking about this as your chart or your business chart, then you know that this is a life change. And we can imagine, actually, this is the Jupiter-Saturn opposition in 2031. So it would be a grand development for the chart of the Great Conjunction. But that's not what we're reading at this time. We're going to go into the synthesis of that with some of our famous people. And so let's just move it forward so we can see that sun progress over into what will be Aquarius. You see that Mercury's already shifted into Aquarius. These are interesting things. Mercury ruling siblings. This might be, oh, my siblings moved from my work. I used to work with my siblings, 10th house. Now my siblings gone off and they live in a different community to me. But I still work with them online. We've got a close bond, this kind of thing. You see that the sun's moving more and more close to Pluto here. You know what Pluto represents, change. And here you have a new moon in the chart. We have a new moon. If we go back, we actually look at the moon. We had the full moon straight 7 years into the progression before the ascendant changed. And so this is the point that we look into. And we find that this would have been the full moon took place here at 9 degrees of Cancer. And this would be in 2029. We go back until you get to the exact altitude, and then we actually know so much about what's going on. And this is just before the ascendant change. We had the full moon, which is about release, it's about change. And so this is a great way to know how this technique works. As you can see, we get carried away with it, but we've got a lot of examples to go with today. So we're going to move into whoever won that vote, whoever won the vote in the live chat. Thank you for your presence in the live chat. I'm grateful for all of you. You're born on a new moon, are you Starry Night Dreams? Starry Night Dreams, thank you for saying that, because that means so much to the knowledge of how your chart progresses. If you were born on a new moon, this means that when you're 14 years old, you have your progressed full moon. And so you can look at which house that falls into in your chart if you know your chart. You also look at the house that the moon rules, and you can consider, oh, I'm releasing and letting go of emotional connection to something, maybe completing a project with regards to a certain synthesis of our own lives. And so you can consider that at the age of 14, and also know at the age of 27, 28, you're going to have another new moon. You can even, if you're smart enough, span it out on your first quarter and your third quarter as well. If you're really smart, you'll be able to know how it transits for each of your houses. And that's very cool. So thank you for sharing that information. We just look at, some people are saying Leo, and then they're talking about DiCaprio, Uma. It's quite a fair split. I think people might be rigging the vote just to see if we can get a fair split. I'm just pulling the chain. I think we're going to go for Uma. Uma seems to have got this one, unless there's any late DiCaprios coming through. It seems to be the case. Thank you very much. Right, well, no offense to you, DiCaprio fan. I'm a huge DiCaprio fan, but we're going to go for Uma. And I think it's good because it splits it up, because we're going to do Dwayne Johnson after. So at least we've got one of each gender. And so this is an example of what you would receive if you were going to receive your own discounted 1 hour progress chart reading, because we're going to just go on a look at Uma Thurman's chart in the progress. Obviously, it's a bit abbreviated. We're not going to spend a whole hour looking at it. We're going to look at the cycle. But if we was having a pitter-patter back and forth between you and I, then I'll be able to talk to you about your life experiences. Be able to say, okay, well, was this when you went to university to study psychotherapy? Oh, wow. You can see your progressed moon's going through your ninth house. How was that for you? Moving away from home for the first time? Wow. Was that emotional or exhilarating? And this would take you to where you are now, as you are using psychology in your astrology work, because I'm talking to a fellow astrologer. Wow, that's a brilliant thing. Thank you for sharing. You know, this is the way that these readings go. This is how these are very healing for us. It's not always upswing either. There's the downswing where we are disseminating in the waning phase of our cycles. We might be letting go. There might be a letting go of our business. We might be letting go because we've had a bereavement. Real life experiences here are very much a part of our conscious growth. So let's have a look at Uma's progress chart. Let me get this ready for you guys on the screen. I appreciate your presence. All the information that you need if you want to invest into your own consultation is in the description box below. As I say, it's a discounted rate for the following 2 weeks, as we are at the third quarter moon currently, and it will be the first quarter moon that we resume normal business. So make the most of this opportunity. Now, here we are. I'm going to share Uma's chart on the screen, and we're going to look at, firstly, her current progress chart. and we're going to reference her natal chart. And so we're going to go back to the natal chart as well. She's actually born in 1970, is Uma Thurman, and she's a natal moon in Libra and a natal sun in Taurus. The moon in Libra was in the 6th house, the sun in the 9th house. And so she was actually born on a 3rd quarter moon, just like we're experiencing right now. And she's a Virgo ascendant. But we'll look at the progress chart and then we'll work our way back. This is what I do with my clients, and this is what we can do together if this is what you would like to invest in. And so here we go. And I'll pull it all up on the screen for you. Here we go. Today is Jupiter's day. It is Thursday, or as I like to call it, Four's Day. They call it Jueves here in Mexico. And so here is Uma Thurman's chart, the progress chart. As I said, Uma was born as a Virgo ascendant. However, you can see here quite clearly that we're talking about a Libra ascendant. Let me just see that you can see it clearly. Yeah, it seems to be on the screen. I'm grateful for that. And so, wow, we can actually see that Uma is just coming off the back of a progressed full moon. Let me just see that you can see this on the screen. I know that I had to press another feature, so I've got to change it one more time. Here we go. I appreciate your patience. Goodness gracious, it's worth it. This is a very, this is a masterclass at this technique. I love it. And so here we go. Excuse me. Is this? I'm not like a good astrologer will not blame their tools. I'm just getting used to sharing the presentation on the screen. So thank you for your patience. Let me animate this. I'm going to share it on the screen and then you shall see it. Here we go. So I have to nurture myself, talk to myself. I'll give you a leading example of self-love. There's 73 people watching this on a world-renowned astrology channel. And I am still sensitive. I still have feelings. And so when I have to make alterations, you know, I get a little bit flushed. You can feel a little bit hot under the collar. So I nurture myself. I speak to myself with love, and I speak to you guys and tell you exactly what's going on. And that brings me into a synthesis of calm and soothed nature. So this is, again, the chart which you can see on the screen. But now what I'm able to do is move it back year by year. We're going to move it back to 1970, which was when Uma was born. Okay. But first of all, if we go back just 1 year, we can actually see that she had this progressed full moon. And so I don't know what's going on in her life right now, but this isn't the point. If you was here with me, we talk about it. But we do know certain things with regards to some of our characters. And so it's going to be useful when we talk about Dwayne Johnson. And also I'll share my example, which is juicy, if you're interested. And so, because obviously I know myself better than anybody, right? We all do. And so that's going to be a good example. But we'll do these famous examples first, because I'm not going to be gluttonous or be accused to be narcissistic, because these are great examples too that you are all familiar with. And so there's a full moon here, January 2021. This was 5 months ago. Full moon, 27 degrees of Sagittarius. Wow, very interesting. Let's look at Jupiter, retrograde, 26 degrees of Libra in the 1st house. This is letting go of identifications. Of what though? Of the world. The moon rules the 10th house, where she's got Mars conjunct her midheaven, identifications with the world. From what? Since a child, maybe. She's able to see herself more clearly. Mars rules the 7th house. She's got Chiron on the descendant in her progress chart in Aries. Wow, quite interesting, because that's where Chiron is in the current sky, or thereabouts. In fact, Chiron's at 12 degrees and the moon's at 10 degrees. That's another story. So this is interesting. So when we know this, we know that actually 14 years ago, it would have been a new moon in Uma's life, a new moon. And so what we're going to do is actually just go back by sevens, and we'll notice any dramatic changes in the charts. If I was talking to you now, we would say, hey, what's gone on in 2019? Because the moon was conjunct your Neptune in the 2nd house. Did you make any irrational investments? Or were you going into your fantasies? Maybe you're buying that dreamy, glamorous car. Neptune rules glamour, but it's in the 6th house. Maybe it could be something like beauty surgery, 6th house, this type of thing, especially in Scorpio, 2nd house. It could be like, you know, what's like Botox, that kind of thing. Just a suggestion. Anyway, let's have a gander at what we're looking at here, and we'll keep going back. So the moon in the second house, while it's there, it's going to synthesize these types of investments. Also, it's also ruling a 10th house. We've got Venus and Mars there. Venus was actually in Leo a moment ago. It's regressed. We're regressing the chart now. We're going backwards through our personal time machine. It's like a catalogue of events that maybe we've forgotten about, that we've lived through, forgot spending our money on that Botox, forgot doing that film when Venus was in our 10th house. I'm not suggesting she does Botox. She's a very glamorous, natural, organic, beautiful woman. Look at this though, like the moon in 2015 conjunct the ascendant and Uranus as well. Wow, that would have been a time. Whatever was going on was certainly a time. And so if we were having a conversation, we can go back in and we would remember that time that really wasn't on the tip of our tongue, really wasn't in our mind. We weren't thinking about that when we woke up before the progress chart reading. And so we can go, well, that's valuable because I didn't actually know that experience with the maturity, the wisdom, which I know myself now 6 years later. So this is very valuable. We see that the third quarter moon was conjunct Pluto in the 12th house. This is the first quarter moon, of the cycle. And so this was 7 years before the full moon that we experienced this year in this chart. Interesting, so it is. Also, it is. And so we keep going back. The moon goes over its own south node, K2, in the 12th house in Virgo, letting go of so much dysmorphia about the body. Virgo is about the body and all that which we keep pent up into the body, even emotions, with the moon going over its own south node in the 12th house. The consciousness of trauma which we store in our bodies can be released in such a transit. I'm not saying that's what it was. It might be that she's releasing loads of movies that she was actually offered to do maybe in a past experience but didn't get to do. South Node stuff, right? It could be a back catalogue, a different material that was filmed a few years ago but finally got released. 12 houses movies as well. And past experiences you see with the South Node and its own moon. But you would have suggested more of a social affair, the moon going through the 11th house, maybe lots of galas, maybe lots of parties, lots of swanky affairs. All of these types of things could have been oh so useful. And if you're planning your life in advance and you see the progressed moon is going to go through the 11th house transit, you know that's potent. But look at the other transits. I mean, we follow the white rabbit. I mean, we do follow the progressed moon in cycle 2 and aspects to all of the planets. We take a little bit more time in consultation and do look at the other aspects that the moon is making. We see here the moon makes a sextile to the ascendant and Uranus, as well as the square from Uranus to Mars. That's a lot of energy. That's a hyperactivity. Mars conjunct the midheaven, Uranus conjunct the ascendant. Wow, the progressed moon in Leo, waxing. It hasn't even reached its first quarter. This is a tremendous amount of excitement. Who's to say, who was to know that this would build into a full moon, just as the world has experienced its first ever lockdown, January 2021, the fallout of it, madness. And so that's when we had the full moon, as we just saw, and we'll keep moving backwards. And Mars stays with the midheaven at the 3rd and the 2nd degree as the midheaven travels back, and the moon joins Mars and the midheaven in 2007, which would have been the waxing crescent phase. And this is when we set out on our journey. We don't know where that journey is going to take us. It's a bit like that crescent moon is a boat, an owl and a pussycat. They went on a boat. So did Pi, that tiger, and so did Astral, the star that represents death in the Book of Dust, written by Philip Pullman. If you know that book, all credit to you. Comment below. Oh, really be grateful if you know that reference. So the moon goes back into Gemini where this lunar cycle began. This moon began at what looks to be 13 degrees of Gemini. And so if I was in conversation with Uma, I'd say, hey, what were you doing back in 2005, Uma? Was it that you were traveling? Was it that you were traveling with a brother or a sister? Maybe you were learning about different philosophy. Maybe you invested in one of Lada Dunshiva's astrology courses, and that will take you a while to decipher. That will take you a while to get your teeth stuck into. That's a very valuable resource of wisdom to really learn about self and the reality through. And you can check out all of those courses on astrolada.com. But this is the 9th house. It's higher learning. You might want to learn about this, and you might want to learn about the financial world, because Gemini is this and that. It's two things. And so you might go deep into the metaphysical wisdom and philosophy, but you might want to learn about something which seems to be more academic and practical, if you will. Not to say astrology isn't academic or practical, but you know what I'm saying here. Okay, and so we see that Mars and Venus very close there. They're getting more and more close. In fact, Mars will come back into Gemini before Venus catches with Mars. They probably have their conjunction in Gemini. We'll see. We'll go back, shall we? She's born in 1970. And so this is the end of a cycle as well as the beginning. Uma has gone beyond the full moon of this cycle, and yet she's still going to have 13 years from this point till the next new moon. 13 years into the future, from 2021, Uma will have another new moon. She's within this cycle that started in 2005 until that point. But let's regress the chart even further. Oh, it's exciting, isn't it? Imagine if this was going through your lifetime and your span. We're going to do it through mine, and I'm going to tell you exactly what happened through mine, but that's not going to happen for another hour yet. We've got a few more examples yet. And so let's go back, and we'll see that this was a gibbous waning phase of the moon. This is when you're dismantling and letting go of so much. We see that Mars has gone back into the 10th house. We go back here, we see that actually, let's go back, progress this chart. Look at that. We had an ascendant change. We're going to go to the month now. We're going to go by the month. Because isn't that interesting? This is always the case in these readings. Always the case in a progress chart reading. Because if you have a new moon, isn't that a big change? If Mars is about to go back into Gemini, isn't that a massive change of consciousness? Of course it is. And so this just see, by going backwards, that actually the ascendant changes here from 0 degrees of Libra back to 29 degrees of Virgo. And this is just 5 months before the new moon. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. So if you're about to have a new moon and your ascendant changes, you're really shifting your identification with things. The ascendant was conjunct Pluto, and then it shifts from Virgo to Libra, and it's conjunct Uranus. Now that's a lifestyle change. And so let's go back at a more of a rapid pace. We do pull it up every time that we see such a significant shift, but so let's just keep going backwards, and we see that Mars will go back into Gemini, joining the midheaven, which also shifted back. And we'll keep going. We have a 3rd quarter waning moon conjunct the North Node Rahu. That would have been very interesting. Obviously, we're just rushing through this now because we want to go and just really get the hair and breadth of the span of these cycles, because we've got a few examples. And so we see that the full moon was here, and this was in a conjunction with Neptune. Very, very interesting. So it is. Full moon conjunct Neptune, that's a big deal. Neptune retrograde in Scorpio in the 3rd house. She's a movie star. Neptune rules the 3rd house. We know that this is when Pulp Fiction came out, which is her most famous film, 1991, you know? So she had a full moon conjunct Neptune in Scorpio when she's in a gangster's movie where she has a heroin overdose. Isn't that a very interesting synthesis? This is what she may be most known for. What happened in that movie was that she got stabbed by a needle going into the middle of her chest, and Mars is by her midheaven, needle, and Venus, she was an intravenous situation, and it's also Venus rules poppies, which make heroin, these types of things, right? Make these types of drugs. Escapism, Neptune rules that kind of stuff, and also it was put in by a hand, which is again Gemini. Isn't that interesting? This is a very culminative full moon. It's at the anaretic degree of Scorpio with the sun at the anaretic degree of Taurus, which is the sign that Uma was born into. Venus rules the sun. But the chart here is ruled by Mercury at this stage. So we look at Mercury, and it was retrograde at 13 degrees of Taurus. We can see that Mercury was visible. It was about to station. It was soon to station after this. But if we go backwards, this means that it's going to be going retrograde for 20 years. This means that Uma was born just after Mercury had stationed retrograde. We shall see that. And it's also conjunct Saturn again. So she's within a distinguished film, but maybe Pulp Fiction and the people within it, like the other celebrities, like Samuel L. Jackson, you know, Quentin Tarantino directed it. It was his first smash hit, although Reservoir Dogs was a hit. It didn't become a hit till after Pulp Fiction. And so also there's other greats, isn't it? John Travolta, they're all there. Whether you think they're great or not, it doesn't really matter. They're famous AF. And so this is the point. We're talking about stars. So this go back, you also see, this just progress this forward a tad, because we have to go back and forth through time. We see that the ascendant here at the third quarter was conjunct at the Pluto. So as this moon was waning, she had the ascendant conjunct Pluto retrograde in her first house. This is a big, powerful energy. Look at that. Also, the Mercury had stationed direct by that point. Just like I said, right? Just like I said. And so there it is, Mercury stationed direct just after the full moon, just as moon was going into Capricorn at the end of Sagittarius. When you've got Mercury retrograde, you're more introspective. And so for the 20 years that Mercury would have been retrograde from 1993 back to around what we will see as when Uma was 3 years old in 1973, Mercury would have been retrograde. So let's just keep going, shall we? And so this moved this backwards. The moon will wax. We're moving backwards, so the moon's waxing. Might be confusing, but you've got this. I intend that this is clear for you guys. And so we will find that what we were doing is that we're returning back to Uma's natal chart at this stage. The moon going back into the 12th house. Who's to say what was going on in the childhood of this young lady that would grow into a film star? Who's to say if she had pushy parents encouraging her? Who's to say if she was just really passionate about films? Who's to say she didn't even care about films at this stage of her life? But you know your life, and so this is what can be very beneficial as we explore the natal chart. Look at that, Venus and Mars. Venus gone back into Gemini. Venus is coming back onto Mars. Venus moves more fast, as you know. And so we actually have Venus and Mars in the sky together. They come on their conjunction on the 19th of July. We're going to do a video about that, I'm sure, on the channel. One of the astrologers will do that. If not, I'll do it in 2 weeks. And so, yeah, look at this. The waning half of the cycle, Venus and Mars meet traditionally every 2 years. And so that would have been an interesting part of a cycle. So this is really interesting. We have the new moon here in Uma's chart. And the new moon was at, looks like 14 degrees here. And this would have been a new moon when the young lady was 6 years old. Whatever was going on, we see the mid-heavens conjunct Venus-ish, 8-degree orb. And we have Mercury retrograde still. If we actually go back, as I say, we do back and forth here. We're going to go back irrationally now, because we want to see that Mercury in its cazimi and see what was going on then. We've gone the wrong way. Let me go back. So look at Mercury in its cazimi with the sun at 18 degrees. Interesting, isn't it? This is when the ascendant was conjunct Ketu, the south node, descendant conjunct Rahu, the north node. And so this woman wanted to be seen. Wanted to be seen in a glamorous light. Rahu, the north node, on the descendant, and she can only see herself through the reactions or the responses of other people. Maybe you can imagine what it would have been like to be a 10-year-old looking and seeking for admiration. The moon in its home sign of Cancer in the 11th house. Interesting things with the conjunction of Mars and Venus. Mars ruling Aries, which is the 8th house of the chart. Venus ruling the 9th house. Interesting. It might be higher learning within community. Who's to say? I don't want to talk about the occult studies of these people. And so let's keep moving. It's cazimi, though, you know, information just streaming through. It's a powerful part of the Mercury cycle. If you've got Mercury retrograde in your progress chart, which all of us will do if we live to the age of 90, we will have Mercury retrograde for 20 years of our lives at some point in the progress chart, whether you're born with it or whether you have it at the age of 60. I know in my life, I don't have it until the end, until the age of 60. Could be that we have it in our earlier years. I often see it either way. It depends. And so here we go. We'll keep going backwards. We did get to that new moon. I just needed to pull back for that cazimi. It's important. And this is where we work within our cycles, in our consultations. We don't miss a beat. We pull back. If you've got any questions, we'll pull back. This is the benefit of this technique. It is glamorous. It's like having a time machine. So the new moon at 14 degrees of Taurus, ruled by Venus at 9 degrees of Gemini, which was 8 degrees away from the ascendant. We can check out Libra as the 2nd house, again, ruled by Venus. And so this is interesting. So it's a very valuable new moon with regards to the investment of that which this person's learning. It's Saturn is conjunct it. It's a very much an enforced or regulated kind of dichotomy with regards to the types of metaphysical language that one might be learning. Maybe it was just acting school, who's to say? Anyway, let's keep going, regressing back, because we're only 6 years away from the natal chart here. And we go back to Uma's natal chart. We can see she was born in 1970. I'll pull up the exact one. Let me just have a little look at my notes here. Uma was born on April 29th. And so let me get that going for you guys. We've gone a little bit far here. So we just go by the month, April 29th. And we'll come back to what was the natal chart. Okay, and so we can see that Uma was born at 22 degrees of Gemini with her moon on a third quarter moon. So this tells us everything, because when we actually went forward, which we're going to do very quickly now, just one more time to get the synthesis, we'll see that every third quarter moon we do come full cycle. She was born at 1 degree of Virgo. Mercury's the chart ruler, and it's retrograde when she was born. Okay, it was retrograde when she was born. It's about a 20-year span. It would have only just turned retrograde when she was born. If we go backwards a year, it was actually that means that it was 1 day before. 1 day before Mercury had stationed retrograde, and so that's interesting, isn't it? And then you see that she's born on the third quarter moon. 8 degrees is the moon, 8 degrees is the sun, and that's her natal chart. We also recognize that Neptune had retrogressed back from 0 degrees of Sagittarius. That's a big deal, because a retrograde Neptune isn't going to move very much. Also, we saw that Jupiter retrogressed. It moves a little bit more fast than Neptune. We see that she's born with the Uranus also, and Pluto retrograde. All of these outer planets are retrograde, and Mercury also at this time of birth. Interesting. So it is. This is the time of birth, and so let's just look at it one more time, moving through, and this is a much more rapid rate. New moon, 6 years old, and then we keep moving. We see that then at that new moon was when Neptune regressed back. Look, it was just, well, it was a little bit before. We see that this happens here. Boom. The IC shifts. They swap. The IC and MC swap as Neptune goes back. Beautiful. And that was 2 years before the new moon. Having to let go of things. It was also when moon was on Chiron in Aries. Who's to say what would have gone on? It's not our business. But regardless, we see that the new moon happened there. We keep going, and we're going to go through just back to the modern day. We had the first full moon conjunct Neptune when Pulp Fiction was released. Then we come to the third quarter moon, back to the phase that she was born in on Rahu. Interesting time. So it was 1998. Don't know what was going on, but Pluto was conjunct the ascendant, very powerful. Obviously, it's 7 years after Pulp Fiction. If you know her career well, you might be able to align that much more. But we had a new moon 14 years ago, and that was in Gemini in 2005. And so that's carried us forward to the present day. And we see obviously ascendant change. We've already been through it all, but this is actually where we are back now as we come back to the summer of 2021. And so we can go forward just as an example and see that she's going to have her third quarter moon in Aries conjunct Chiron, just like we've got a third quarter moon in Aries conjunct Chiron right now, but this one won't be until 2028. And that means that we know that Uma will have a new moon in her 10th house in 13 years in the year 2020, in the year 2035. And so that's jolly exciting. That is very empowering. This tells us a lot. So I'm going to give you a few more stats and figures about this technique. And then we're going to look. Still voting in the chat for Leonardo. We love Leo. We do. We love a little bit of Leo. I do. Maybe we'll feature his chart on another expose. We'll keep him in the mix. We'll keep him in the mix further down the line. I like Leo a lot because he's got his actual Venus, the same degree as I've got my natal Venus in Scorpio. And he's a Libra ascendant and a Libra moon like me. And Leonardo DiCaprio has a Mercury Uranus conjunction, just like me. Anyway, this ain't about me yet. We will look at my natal chart and my progress chart because it's the best one that I'm able to talk about because I know myself. And so we'll do that expose, but we're going to look at Dwayne Johnson's first for the next half an hour or so. Dwayne Johnson is actually one of the world's, if not the world's, most famous movie stars. And so we're going to look at him. But first of all, what you can tell about this technique, I've already described that the sun moves 1 degree every year and the moon moves 13 degrees every year. Okay? And so over the course of 27 years, the moon will return to the same part of its phase in correlation to the sun, that which you were born into. Just like Saturn takes 28 years to go around the sky, it's like the hour hand of our lives. It's our hand of divinity. And so what we get to see is that actually this played out in real life. The real of our reality, the manifestation of our real experience, plays out day to day. So if I had myself, a new moon when I was 6, which I did, a progressed new moon at the age of 6, that would have actually been a new moon 6 days after my birth. 6 years is 6 days. So for instance, if you were, just for argument's sake, and excuse me, this is a delicate and emotional example, if you were adopted at the age of 6, or for instance, another example, if you changed schools at the age of 6, and that's when you had your new moon in your progressed chart, then maybe at 6 days old, you would have had a similar vibrational encounter. Because whatever happens at 6 days old in the real lifespan, when the real new moon took place in real time, then in the progressed chart at 6 years old, we have a reverberation of that harmonic frequency manifest into the experience of our lives. And so for me, as I said, I had a new moon at the age of 6. My parents got divorced. We'll look at that just after we go into Dwayne Johnson's chart. If you smell what I'm cooking, he was the rock. But this means at 6 years old, something very powerful would have happened. Like at that time, I never actually met my natal father. I never met my dad. I'm the Sun conjunct Neptune. That's that kind of formula in Capricorn. And so for me, actually, when I had a progressed new moon at the age of 6, my mum divorced the man that she married, who I called father, who I called dad. And so we see that these things echo out. And so maybe you can recognize that in your cycles as well. Just a seed of inspiration. But obviously I'm here to help and serve you. If you want me to guide you on this discounted special offer that we have available for you for the next 2 weeks, you can get your own natal chart reading with me. All the information that you need is below. It's a progressed chart reading and it's a special reduced price offer. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to share your chart on the screen, just like we're about to do with Dwayne Johnson. I see some people saying, let's do Brittany. Brittany would make a fine example. What I would like to do if we was doing someone like Brittany is I'd like to go onto Wikipedia and I'd like take some notes, like when each of her big albums came out, when she shaved her head, when she was with JT, Justin Timberlake, and see the transits of the progressed moon in alignment with these things. You can imagine like the progressed moon in a conjunction with Mars in the 12th house, shaving the head, bald. Interesting types of, that's just my imagination, guessing the synthesis of that. Thank you for your presence today. I'm grateful for you. I've actually got a consultation to honor in an hour. So we've got an hour to spend with this example. I'm grateful for you sticking the live chat. I've been excited to share this with you guys for quite some time. And so thank you for your patience. Thanks for sticking around. Thank you for being you. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. And thank you for giving yourself a thumbs up, goodness gracious. If you are watching this in the recording, I'm grateful for you as well. Thank you for commenting below. There was some such lovely comments in the videos that I've done so far for the full moon in Capricorn and the expose that I did with Lada, as well as the video that I did with Roy Gillett. So thank you, you guys, for your lovely comments. I really do dearly appreciate your reflections. Now, let me get Dwayne Johnson's chart up. I am intending that this is a useful selection of examples which I have chosen for you guys today. I know that it might not be relevant for everybody, but if we take it as an astrological technique that we're sharing, then I find that you can find the wealth of the information which I'm using here. Right. Okay. Well, we're going to do exactly the same thing what we did with Uma. And so basically you can use your awareness that if you've got an hour with me, then we're going to spend more time going into the details of things in the 2 hours. So that's why it's much more of a counseling session, much more of a psychotherapy development kind of experience. My mother was a psychotherapist. In fact, she teaches the course in England. She teaches the university course. I grew up with her, and so it's basically being able to hold space while we look at all of your experiences through the astrological template. What we're going to do is juggling all these technical, I am really make miracles. So it is we're going to go straight back to the natal chart of Dwayne. He was born 1970. Let me cycle back, and then we'll walk on back. We'll get the chart back. I didn't know. I appreciate you. It's good to go. Done wrestling in 1999, and the character was all famous point. So what we're going to do is going to go back. I also read autobiography. I don't mean it just wasn't. So what we're going to do is go through the rest. Gosh, basically allows me to move the chart, and I don't know if it means that you can see it progressing. So let me just see if you can see it, because I pressed the wrong. Let me look. Yes, it's working. Okay, so back through the time machine. It's interesting. Isn't he the same age as Uma? 1972. He's 2 years younger than our Uma Thurman is doing. We go back to 1972. Interlude music. It really helps in time. So then we'll walk through it. It was May the 2nd. Bomb. And here we have, and the reason that this is great about Brain anyway, because of the character we watched the guy's movies, I know, and so here you go. This is he is a Libra of Ascendant and a Taurus sun, and this sun are ruled by Venus. This is a major because we're going to trade in the chart. Uma had an example of living through Mercury retrograde and lives through the hook to grab you in to know what is the most phenomenal thing ever. I am grateful to be able to share it with you. But first of all, just go into the character a little bit. He's known as, in wrestling, as the Brahma Bull. Brahma Bull. And he's a Taurus sunshine, which is the bull, the most valuable of signs. And we can also assimilate Taurus to Moses, because Moses was the rock. And this character, Dwayne Johnson, would become known as the rock, because this is that part of the sky. Not only that, Brahman in Vedic astrology is like the pineal gland. It's Brahman in the cosmology of the Vedas is on a lily pad, smoking a shatti, because Venus is consciousness. I can see starting to get wonky. Thank you for letting me know, Kate. I appreciate you. We do our best. We do. I ain't got a booster. Will stick with us. I ain't going nowhere until I'm done. Capricorn. I'm sticking with you guys. I'm devoted. Thank you for you sticking with me, even if the drop every now and then. I'm for you. So this guy wasn't only known as the Brahma Bull, most professional of all time, as selling of the modern flying man in all of entertainment, because he's got Uranus conjunct his ascendant in his natal chart. That's mad, because Uranus is shocking, Uranus is electrifying. And so we can see that that's very important. Also, Uranus's secret societies. Oh no, we're not going to go there. But it rules his fifth house of creativity, where he has his Rahu. That gives him his sense of direction in life, his heart's creativity. Ooh, very interesting. Also, you can see he's got Pluto retrograde at 29 degrees of Virgo. That's very interesting. And so there we go. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I appreciate you. I love your comments in the chat. Each of you are deeply appreciated. Thank you for your contributions. We also see in the natal chart that the moon is waning. It was born 2 to 3 days after a full moon in Scorpio. And the moon is in a conjunction with Jupiter, both of which fall into the nakshatra of Mula, which is a scary kind of goddess deity that actually offers us a rite of passage when we move directly through it. When we move directly through the whatever is intimidating for us, we see that actually we're empowered beyond inferiorities, beyond the atmosphere, to something very, very beneficial within our life experience. I've got my sun at 3 degrees of Capricorn. That's where the last full moon was. We as humanity are going through a rite of passage right now. We've spoke about that in another video at length. Check it out if you haven't done so already. If you've got stuff between 23 degrees and about 9 degrees, or 23 degrees of Sagittarius and about 9 degrees of Capricorn, that's that same nakshatra. And so the belief systems, Jupiter, the way that this gentleman would nurture himself in the world is all, and the way this guy would communicate. He's very good on the microphone. Jupiter rules his third house as well as his sixth house. His body of work is his communication. Anyway, let's talk about this gentleman a little bit more as we progress the chart. And we're going to see some very interesting developments in how this takes place. And it's phenomenal. Just like we saw with Uma, when you read the cataclysmic moments in the progression of the chart, it is a very big evolution for our life experiences and the consciousness that we're working through. And so also interesting to note, I just chose these people kind of off the top of my head to a degree. And we saw that Uma and The Rock both had the Mars-Venus conjunction at some point in their lives. In fact, they're living through similar experiences here, right? This is they were 2 years apart, as I said. Mars and Venus meet every 2 years, and so it's just really nice poetry that we have the Mars-Venus conjunction in a couple of weeks, and we're picking up on it in both of their charts. Anyway, that's the different subject matter. Now you're going to see, as we progress this chart forward, the sun move 1 degree per year, and we're going to see the moon move 13 degrees per year. Interesting, so it shall be. Let's do it. The moon will be in Capricorn for the first 2 years of the gentleman's life, and then it went into the fifth house of Aquarius. Again, you could suggest this was an opportunity to find creative talents within his community. From an early age, the moon trining Uranus and going on to trine his ascendant by the time he was 4 years old. It would be the third quarter, waning half of a lunar cycle, which would have began back at the beginning of Taurus, one would imagine. And so we can see that this is now closing out, and he would have been getting more clear on his role in the world. If you know The Rock, he'd always say you've got to know your role. And so then we keep going, and we see that he would have had a new moon in his chart here at 22 degrees of Taurus. That means for the cycle he was born into was actually in Aries, excuse me. And so let's just have a look. Have a little look. Oh gosh, my computer program's going crazy. Let's bring it back to the exact degree for the new moon. This new moon would have taken place if he was born when he was 10 years old. When he's 10 years old. And we see that both Venus and Mars have moved into Cancer. Venus moves more fast, as we know. So this would have been an interesting experience. The guy played professional football at an early age. I think he lost his virginity at the age of 16, according to his book. Might have been 14. I don't know. Can't remember. But we shall keep waxing now. But we can see that this would have developed the whole cycle. In fact, I'm going to let you in on the secret. I've already mentioned it if you've caught this from the beginning. And that is that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is living through Venus retrograde. But not at this point. Not when we're at this stage of his life. Venus is in shadow of what will be a turn retrograde. Venus turns retrograde 14 years after this, when we have the full moon. And this is interesting because Venus is the natal chart ruler. This matters so much. And if you know The Rock, he would say, it doesn't matter. But I'm telling you, this matters. And so this moon would wax. Let's have a look at it. Mars-Venus conjunction there. You see, Venus is slowing down. Mars overtook Venus, and the ascendant shifted. This just go back by the month. This is interesting story. Interesting story that we find out using these techniques. Obviously, if we're having the conversation with the person who lived the life, it makes it even more interesting because you know your life. And you can say, well, this is what happened to me then. But let's look. Let's look. Let's just see that this ascendant changes. Let's do it to there we go. From Libra ascendant to a Scorpio ascendant. And so Venus was in front of Mars. Venus was the chart ruler. Now the chart's ruled by Mars. But yet the moon will continue on into its home sign of Cancer. Mars moves on to the same degree as Venus. The moon joins Mars and Venus at the same degree, 2 degrees, trining the ascendant in 1985. The young man's probably losing his virginity in the back of a car, according to his autobiography. And so this is interesting. And we'll see here, look, Mars overtakes Venus because Venus was shifting into retrograde. And so we can consider this guy was born about a week before Venus went retrograde, about 2 weeks before Venus shifted retrograde in real life. So when he was a baby, Venus went retrograde before even he was able to start walking or talking. Interesting to have that experience. And so look at Mars, overtakes while the moon's still in its home sign, just a few months after, or a year after, the chart ruler became Mars. So Mars is, in a sense, ruling the pack here of the personal planets. Mercury hanging behind the sun here, then Venus, then Mars. We're not including the moon, too fast at this stage. But look, this keep going at a more fast rate. I just really needed to zone in on that Mars shift because that's important to the psychological development of a character. He's a sports player and he's losing his virginity at an unsavory age. I mean, I'm not casting opinions. You lose your virginity when you lose your virginity. I only lost it a few years after, but like 14, 17, what's the difference? Time is a thing. It's about intelligence and honoring, isn't it, really? Look at this. So we have our first quarter moon of this cycle in the fixed signs at anaretic degrees. The culminative degree of the fixed signs of Taurus, where the sun is, and the moon at the fixed sign of Leo, conjunct the fixed star, royal fixed star Regulus. Woo! That's crazy. And so let me get that third quarter exact. 29 degrees. There you go. And so look at that. It will be a year later after this first quarter moon of the cycle that started at 22 degrees of Taurus, 7 years prior when the guy was 6 years old. So now he's like, as I say, 14 or something like this. Excuse my maths. It's 13, 14. Again, this is when he lost his virginity according to his book. Last time I'm going to say it. And so the moon goes into the 11th house. If he's playing football or whatever you want to call it, a university or whatever you guys call it. I'm from England, we call it different things. And so the sun goes into his 8th house of personal relationships, conjunct Saturn. He's really, kind of maybe learning about all kinds of different things. Saturn is restrictions, but it's also regulations that allow you to ascend over an apparatus and pay your time and due diligence. Interesting. And so we recognize a lot from that. He's a Scorpio ascendant with the Sun and Saturn in the 8th house. And we also recognize he's got that 29 degrees Pluto, which the Moon conjuncts in 1991. I don't know to go into the personal story. Eventually, he went and really made successful to a certain degree his football career, but then it didn't pan out. Didn't pan out for the guy, and he had to go cap in hand to his dad and say, "Hey, how about me following you?" Because his dad, Rocky Johnson, was a professional wrestler, and so he would learn to become a wrestler. He would follow his dad, and it was around 1996 that he made his debut in the WWF as a professional wrestler. Moon. So when he's having to let go of his career, I mean, I spell it out. Sometimes I think and don't say it. So the Moon's going through the 12th house, letting things go, letting go of his football career, letting go of his community at high school. The Moon goes into his 1st house. He's deeply plunging into something he can emotionally get invested in, something that is, professional wrestling is very occult because it's like Shakespearean. They're working together, putting on a dramatization. They're painting a portrayal of characters. And so this is interesting. And we're moving towards a full moon, remember? This full moon's going to be in Sagittarius. And as you can see, with the Sun conjunct Saturn and the Moon conjunct Neptune, the guy signed a contract with the WWE and debuted in the Survivor Series October 2006. He wasn't the character which we would come to know as the Rock. Look at that, the Moon going in to, this is when he debuted, and the Moon goes into the 2nd house of money and performing on a worldwide audience. How glamorous is that to see the Rock, as he was known back then as Rocky Maivia, worldwide. The Moon in Sagittarius conjunct the very glamorous, elusive Neptune. Neptune ruling his 5th house of creativity. It's a very creative role. You've got to know your role if you'd be in that kind of creator. And so look, let's prove this to the full moon, which was at 7 degrees or so. Yes, 7 degrees here, conjunct Neptune. And now look, let's go back a little bit more here, just before the full moon. Why? I've got to just go into a bit of esotericism. Can't help it. I can't help it. And I know you guys are up to date on this channel. We know that we talk about the pandemic and all of the BS in the world, and we're just going in. So excuse me. We've all got our own opinions and things, but we're going in now. And so in 1997, this guy would have become world famous. He was doing singles with Wycliffe Jean. And what was that song that he did with Wycliffe in the West Indies? It doesn't matter. That song, and he was advertising all kinds of things. This is before he was a movie star. He was on MTV hosting awards, but he was still a professional wrestler most of the week. And so Venus stations retrograde just before the full moon, while the moon's in a conjunction with Neptune and the sun's in a conjunction with Saturn. This man would have been signing away lots of contracts at this time. He'd have been signing away his, maybe he doesn't even know the legislation which he would be signing into, whether it was a movie deal, or whether it was an advertisement deal, or whether it was a deal with the WWE or F. Just for your consciousness, you can choose yourself. But we know that this person's an influencer, and the people who are actors within movies and advertisements, as innocent as they are to you and I, the contracts they sign can put them into situations where they have to advertise things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily choose. They can sell sometimes what you would consider their moral virtues, Venus, or their self-value away, just so that they can get their fame and fortune, or so that they can live their dreams. One must be very discerning when going into famous situations. If Lada or I were offered an opportunity to go and do astrology on a big stage, we would have to be very discerning. They might want to sway our influence to talk about certain things in certain ways. This is what happens to our celebrities, whether they're famous performers on the silver screen, whether they're famous sports people or maybe even scholars or TV presenters. We know all of these things. I'm not looking at your comments. I'll be too distracted, but thank you for your contributions. I'll maybe go back and look at them later, but I imagine they are amusing to certain degrees. I appreciate your contributions. So Venus would station retrograde, and I'll let you into a secret, into the drama of this. Venus is still retrograde in the rock's progress chart. This is 1997, which is about 23 years ago. And so in the progress chart now, the rock is actually, after another new moon, more than 7 years into another cycle. It's waxing. So this is the full moon in 1997, and the full moon's always a completion, always a release, always a let go. And so the moon rules Cancer, where the south node is, and where Mars is, and where Venus stationed retrograde at this time. He's releasing so many karmic belief systems, releasing so much personal identification, you could suggest. You could even say he's releasing his day-to-day rituals. Mars ruling his 6th house, Venus ruling his 7th house, the way he would feel seen, where he would feel recognized. Venus also ruling his 12th house, where he's got Uranus retrograde, which is about his connection to the collective, you can suggest. And so the full moon is always a release, and it's conjunct Neptune. Maybe he wasn't aware. Fog. He wasn't clear. He didn't have clarity on the contract, Saturn conjunct the Sun in the 8th house, that he was going into. Saturn ruling his 3rd house and his where Capricorn is, where the North Node is, where Jupiter is. And as well as that, you could suggest that Saturn also rules his 4th house of secret societies and communities. Interesting, so it is. You heard that how much I love Dwayne and The Rock and professional wrestling. You know, you heard it. But this is the authentic, what we see in the astrology chart. So we'll keep going. Don't even know if these guys are alive these days. Now that's a humdinger. That's a conspiracy. We're not going there. But we're open to these things. The full moon took place at 6 degrees, and then it would start waning. It would go over. This we know about his life. He would he did his first movie around this time in 2000, and this would have been opposite Venus retrograde and Mars, conjunct Jupiter. His first movie was The Mummy Returns, the sequel to The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. He played the Scorpion King. And then he would go on to do many movies. And they were all like cameos at first, just so that we could familiarize ourselves with this character, the kind of family man, the big alpha, you know, the guy that most men would like to be, or most women would like to be with. That's what society would like to portray. But he was still a professional wrestler. He had his match with Stone Cold Steve Austin in the spring of 2001. That was really when he started to phase out his career and move into the movies, move into more of the behind the scenes, which is almost like he directs his own movies and writes his own scripts. These days, he's got a lot of influence. He's a modern day Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger went on to be the governor of California. What's to say that this influencer doesn't go on to similar things? You also know the president, the last one, who that was. People who've got big influence can really sway an audience. This would be a very powerful choice to put into position within politics. Okay, and so let's keep moving. And so we will find that the moon going through this more rapid space goes into its 3rd quarter here in the 5th house in Scorpio. He certainly let go of his professional wrestling career. He came back here and there. He had big gaps away from it because he was working on his movie career. 3rd quarter moon, letting go of old belief systems, maybe wanting to let go of the old identification of the wrestler. He started talking different. He started calling himself Dwayne Johnson rather than The Rock. And so our perception of him is changing, and that's by purpose, creation, cultivation. And so he did so many movies. He came back and wrestled John Cena in 2011. And we have a new moon here. This is part of his contract with WWE. Yeah, you can go and do movies. You can do what you want, Dwayne, but you've got to come back. Even though he loves professional wrestling, no doubt. We say that. We don't know, do we? But the new moon, we see that Venus goes back into Gemini. Let's check it out. This new moon would have been the cycle which we're still within now. And it also closes out the cycle which we started, which was before he was a wrestler when he was still in high school, right? And so this is interesting. The new moon, Venus is still in Cancer, and so that's intriguing. But we see that it would have regressed almost instantly. Let's look at that moon. Wax. The Venus comes back, joining Mercury at the anaretic 29th degree. And so if we just go back and put the status of this new moon, because it's 28 years. When we look at this cycle, this is for the next 28 years, from 2011 all the way through to, like, what we're saying is that 2039 or something like that, which is a lot into the future. This has got bandwidth to it. And so we can see the midheavens in the 11th house. It's about going into society. Pluto's there as well, squaring Mercury. And so the whole 28 years is this challenge of having to do things maybe behind the scenes, maybe to speak about things which are hidden, maybe doing secret communications. All of this energy is that 8th house new moon conjunct Saturn. Well, it's about 9 degrees from Saturn. It's about 8 degrees from Mercury. Mercury's underneath the beams. It is a Gemini ruled, Mercury ruled new moon in the 8th house. So these are interesting things for us to assimilate, if you know what I'm saying. If you know what I'm saying, as an influencer, we know that this guy actually evoked, like many famous people, were encouraging people to get their shots and things. That's not so cool. If you ask me, that's an opinion. I'm not asking you. We're all divided, maybe, and the choices are our own to choose ourselves and sovereignty and health and things like this, right? Educate ourselves. But if there's so many people who could be easily swayed by an influencer like Dwayne or a Kanye West or whoever, you know. And so discernment is key. I beg of our discernment and our admiration and where we place these things. And so let's progress it by year. Actually, we're going to do it by month, aren't we? Because we want to see Venus change. And so Mercury moves forward to anaretic degree. It was at 28, still squaring an 89 degree square to Pluto. But look at Pluto. Let's go back. Excuse me. Hold up. I regress charts every day because Pluto was retrograde when he was born. And so look at this. Just before the new moon in 2011, Pluto stationed. You could have a whole lifetime without a shift of Pluto going from retrograde to station or station to retrograde because it's so slow, man. And so this is very interesting. Waning gibbous phase, balsamic phase of the moon, and Pluto stations retrograde there as the moon goes through its exaltation in Taurus. And so, yeah, now we move forward. Venus goes into the cycle. The moon's still in the 8th house. Venus joins it, regresses back straight away. 1 year after the new moon in 2012, he's back on the movie circuit maybe, and the moon goes into Cancer in 2013. And so Venus will be in the 8th house for a while. You see that Venus is moving more and more close to the sun. Let's just talk about Venus retrograde for a moment. Venus this year shall retrograde in Capricorn. When Venus goes retrograde, it's shifting from either the morning star, where you see Venus as the last star visible before daybreak, to the evening star, where Venus currently is, which is the first star visible after the sun has left the local vicinity. And so what we recognize is that when Venus goes retrograde, it is a shift from one post to the next. And so we recognize that the sun catches up with Venus. Venus can only travel so far in front or behind the sun. And so, like a string on a yo-yo, Venus comes back to the sun, gets immersed within its own light, gets assumed within its own light. You can't see Venus when it's underneath the beams. If you watch Crassy on this channel, you shall know exactly what we're talking about. And so while Venus is beneath the beams, Venus, the goddess of beauty, values and virtues, goes into the underworld. This happens every 18 months. And so we shall see that actually Venus underneath the beams eventually makes its conjunction with the sun. And that's what we're looking at now. And so the moon continues to wax through its own sign, goes over its own south node, and Venus draws closer to the sun as the sun draws more close to Venus. And we're almost at the present day. This is 2016. We'll see the moon makes a conjunction with the midheaven in 2017. And then the year after, we have the sun conjunct Venus. This is when Venus is like, hey, take me if you will, but I'm empowered. Take me if you will into the underworld, Hades, but I ain't your bitch. Hades, you're kicked out of the throne. I'm within my own empowerment. I've stripped myself bare of everything just to be within the graces of my own nature. This is what Venus says when she's in the underworld. She's empowered by her own darkness and her shadow falls away. The illusions fall away. And so you can consider that when Venus went retrograde, just 3 months before the rock's full moon in 1998, and has been retrograde for 20 years since then. 20 years. And now it's in its conjunction with the sun at this stage, just a year before the first quarter moon. This is very powerful because it's like recognizing that this guy is having a walk through the dark night of the soul, through his progress chart, through an expanded phase of his life, doing things which are, in a sense, maybe occult or behind the scenes. Maybe he didn't realize that he was getting snarled up within this legislation, within these contracts, but yet once you're in it, there's not much getting out of it. Maybe I'm being too generous. It's not for me to say. Regardless, Venus is in its conjunction with the sun. It's a cazimi. And we move on. And so we have a third quarter moon here conjunct Pluto, and that took place a year ago, or just over a year ago, in 1999, at the end of 2018. And so as we moved into 1999, and I don't know if these celebrities had a briefing, but Lada and I did a video about the year 2020 and what we were going to experience back in 2017. So in 1999, the oligarchs, the celebrities of this world, certainly the corporations of this world, would have had drip down information with regards to preparation for this kind of thing. The moon is conjunct Pluto, which rules the chart, as well as Mars with the South Node, co-ruler of the chart, while it's in its first quarter moon of this stage of this cycle. And so we moved to 2020 and the moon's in the 12th house. This guy would have been locked down, doing shops on Instagram. I saw him. And yet it's in a sense propagating, do your bit. He was influencing, do your bit, acquiesce, don't ask questions, influencing online. And so we moved the chart forward and we're kind of where we are at now. The moon's in the rocks, progress 12th house, and the rules the 9th house. Mars is coming towards the South Node. Interesting, isn't it? And so we're going to move forward by month. See that moon comes out of the 12th house and the sun goes into Cancer. And so that's where we are at. Well, this is about to happen. Today is the 1st of July, and the progress chart is saying that actually the moon's at 28 degrees of Libra here in a trine to the sun as we do this right here, right now. And that's quite lovely. And so what we're seeing is that in 2 months, the moon's going to progress into Scorpio. And as that happens, the sun progresses into Cancer. This happens in September. Who's to say what's going to happen? Who's to say the influence and the way that this guy shows his face, the moon, on an international level in a creative way? The sun rules the 10th house. And it's interesting. Before it makes its progress into Cancer, the sun squaring Pluto, as we know. Interesting. So it's currently squaring Pluto, then it comes off that as it makes ingress into Cancer. We're just going to move forward to the full moon. Just have a look at this. And so we'll see that the ascendant shifts as well. Look at that. The ascendant's going to shift just as we get to the full moon. The ascendant changed it to Scorpio in 2005. And then we have the full moon in Capricorn conjunct Jupiter in 2006. Who's to say if he's president of the world, of the United States, or if he's been reprimanded and made an example of? We just don't know. Maybe he's still wrestling. I'd like to see him come back and have another match. That would be fun. Look at that though. This full moon is actually got the South Node conjunct Mars and Mercury, as well as Jupiter ruling the chart, Jupiter retrograde conjunct the full moon in the second house in Capricorn. And this is at February 2007. Wow, imagine if this is you. Imagine if that's your chart, and now you've got the knowledge of what it's like to have lived through a Venus retrograde and a cazimi of that, and a couple of full moons, and you know the synthesis of your experience. You can invest in a 2-hour progress chart reading, which is at a discounted rate for the next 2 weeks. In the description box, you can find all the information to get that done. We'll arrange a mutually beneficial time for us to connect in the coming days. I am excited to do that. You can even get an abbreviated 1-hour one. If you already feel that you're pretty adept with your chart, we can do the 1 hour, and I'm here to serve you with that. The 2-hour is that deep dive, a bit like what we're doing here, but it will go even more deep because we're talking to one another. We're holding space and see what comes up. And we can be surprised what comes up. I'll give you one example. I was doing this with a client a few years ago, and there's a transit of the progressed moon through Gemini, something like this. And they had it was like square Pluto or something like this, and their sibling had a boyfriend, and they had witnessed the boyfriend get run over by a car, and so they'd forgotten about this. But because the progressed chart, because the date, it brought it up. And so the emotions, they wasn't expecting these things to come up, but they come up, and yet you can bring so much healing because the healing wasn't done then. She took care of her sister. With the grief, like the trauma stays in our body, in the cellular membrane. But when we go back into looking at these things, we can go, oh, wow, I was really, really caring to my sibling. Oh, I really could give myself the love that I needed back then now. And so we revise our perspective. We shift the script, and we do a lot of healing as we raise our frequency with regards to our own experiences. And that's the most beneficial thing. But again, this is great for business too. As I say, you can progress and look about moving house. You can look at doing things with your business. I'm already looking about my business. And so let's get into it, shall we? As again, if you want to make your investment, then in the description box below, all you need to know there for you. I'm here to serve you and excited to connect. I'm going to talk about me now. We've done an hour and a half talking about other people. For the next 20 minutes, in the close, we're going to talk about me, because I have a progressed new moon on Monday. And so this is my favorite technique. As I said, I've been learning about it for about 7 years. And so I was born on a 3rd quarter moon. Actually, it was just after a 3rd quarter moon. And the best way for us to do this is to just show you guys the experience. I know my life, and I can tell you exactly what I've lived through. And then you can see the expose and the development of what I've lived through, as well as where we're moving towards. And so this is we'll do it pretty fast because I know myself and I can talk about it more quickly. So thanks for sticking with for your intrigue, because this is obviously a vulnerable thing to share, the self, but also very exciting to be able to share this with you guys, because this is, as I said, it's such a wealth of information which we can gather from these charts, but also I love the development, just as a storyteller, I love the development of how this takes place. And so I'm just getting my chart set up from natal position onwards so that we can move it forward. I mean, I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but we'll probably go close to a certain degree. Just through the next 20 minutes though, as I say, I've got a reading in 25 minutes, so we're going to squeeze this into 20 minutes. I can do it. I bet you could do it better though, because you know your life better than me. So I'm just a guide. I'm just a bit like a taxi driver who takes you to the place that you want to go. So if you want to cab through the cosmic universe on your own personal journey, I can be your taxi driver. I can be your astrological guide if you resonate with this technique, or even just the energy which I'm able to hold, the space that I can hold for you. Then it's my honor, pride, privilege, and passion to be able to share with you, and professional ability as well, because I've become very good at this. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you for your contributions in the live chat. I'll be sharing the chart on the screen. Here we go. And so this is my natal chart. I'm born on the 26th of December 1986, and I'm born with a Libra ascendant with the South Node in Libra and the Moon in Libra. I'm not going to diversify my chart too much. We'll just talk about it for a moment so you know. I'm an astrologer and I work with the occult. My chart ruler is Venus, and Venus is in the sign of Scorpio. It rules the occult. It trines my midheaven, which is Cancer, ruled by the Moon. I've got the Moon in the first house. I identify with my work. I'm a Capricorn sun in the third house, conjunct Neptune. I didn't meet my father. However, I love metaphysics, I love spirituality, but I didn't find it for a little while, and we'll walk through that story in just a moment. I had to find myself, Mars in Pisces, conjunct Neptune. I had to find out that I'm an astrologer. And it's astrology that gave me my identity. It's astrology that gave me my sense of craftsmanship. And so this is very powerful. When I first met Lada, she said that the best feature of my chart, which is my favorite thing, that maybe Lada said some lovely things to me over the years, but Lada said that I'm the astrologer of the astrologers, which is an absolutely amazing compliment. Because I have the Moon at 24 degrees of Libra, conjunct the fixed star Chitra. In Vedic astrology, they call it Chitra. In Western astrology, we call it Spica. And it's conjunct the South Node, the Moon's own South Node, as well as my ascendant. And so my Moon also sextiles my Mercury-Uranus conjunction. And so for me to express my emotions and for me to talk and hold space about emotions is a gift. I've got a groundwater trine with Venus, which is the chart ruler in Scorpio, and Mars in Pisces, and the midheaven in Cancer. And so my ability to use intelligence and wisdom when talking about emotions is second to none. And that's my gift, which I have for myself, those people that I share my life with, and my clients that I hold space with. And so it took me a while to find that, though. I didn't become an astrologer professionally working full-time in 2017. So let's put you through this journey. I say put you through. I'm going to walk through this journey pretty fast. I didn't meet my father. My mum had an affair with a man called Philip, and he seeded me as a gift because my mum had actually had a son who drowned 10 years before I was born. And his name was Daniel, and my biological father was called Philip. So that's my name, Philip Daniel Miles. And so the Moon would go into Scorpio a year after. You see, the tradition is that the sun moves 1 degree per year and the Moon moves 13 degrees per year. And so my mum would marry a man who I would call Dad, and his son was the same degree as Leonardo DiCaprio. Not that you guys saw it, we'll see it next time. At 20 degrees of Scorpio. So the person who called me son, who I called Dad, had his son conjunct my natal Venus, and the Moon would conjunct my natal Venus and that gentleman's son when I was 2, when they got married. And the sun itself was conjunct Neptune by progression at that point. And so we keep going, and the Moon goes into the third house. That's gentleman, his parents were very worldly and Sagittarian and Aquarian. My grandparents, we gained a family through that experience. It wasn't just me and my mum anymore. We were enveloped by a family. Mercury goes into Capricorn. Who's to say? I was communicating 1990, blah, blah, lots of different things going on. But the point is that actually my parents divorced. They didn't last that long, 6 years. It was nice. I grew up in a very loved situation as far as I can tell. But the point is, they divorced when we had this progressed new moon. I was born 6 days before a new moon, and when I was 6 years old, I had a new moon in my progressed chart at 9 degrees of Capricorn in my 4th house. My parents would get divorced, and we would move house that year. I would go and live with my mum, okay? And so I'd see my dad maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and he was diabetic. Eventually, he would die of diabetes. I had to do the Capricorn thing and take care of him a lot, which was what Capricorns do. We grow up pretty quick. And so that's what happened. And we would find that actually as this moon progresses, I would join high school in the year 1999, and I would get a little bit, and so the moon's in the sign of boys, in Aries, and we have a first quarter moon here in the year 2000. And so I would actually end up becoming agoraphobic. I got very badly bullied at school. I was an only child, and I used to get on with girls a lot better. Then I went to an only boys' school. It was quite disorientating. I didn't like it. I felt very, very vulnerable, and I didn't want to go to school. I didn't go to school for 18 months. 18 months. And so it was actually in September 2013, while this moon was transiting the 8th house of the occult, of the hidden, I was a recluse. I was scared to leave the house. I was phobic. It was a deep, deep depression. Mars makes ingress into the 7th house at this point. I was identifying with my reflection. I was identifying with my fears. I was feeling very scared at these times. And so I returned back to society 2 weeks after 9/11 in September 2001. And this was just after the first quarter moon, the moon actually trining the sun back in Capricorn conjunct Mercury at 18 degrees, Mercury underneath the beams. Very shy I was, but then we got a nice harmonic opening for me to rejoin society, and that was lovely. So if I was agoraphobic, I wanted to reintegrate into society, get some friends. I was very alienated. That would take some time. I only went half days at school at first, didn't get on. I got bullied, but they found an outroad where I could go to higher learning. They sent me to college 2 days a week so that I could bear with it, which was so nice because I went to music production college. The moon goes into the 9th house of higher learning in 2002. I also went to my first music festival as well. That was great stuff. I was playing the drums. Capricorn keeps time because Saturn rules Capricorn. It's the farthest thing we can see of our naked eye. It's like the hour hand, just like the progressed moon. So yeah, the moon went over Chiron. This point, I was just doing a lot of things in college, exploring different things. It was very healing for my belief system and stuff like this. In 2005, the man that I called Dad and my mum married when I was 1, when the moon was conjunct my Venus, and divorced when I was 6, when we had the new moon, he would die. He passed away in December 2005, and this is just before the full moon. I had also acquired lots of friends because I'd integrated back into society. And so we have the full moon a year after my father had died at 24 degrees of Cancer, and it was allowing me to really come into contact with my emotions at this point. But I had acquired so many friends, and as an only child, that's all I ever wanted. I wanted a social life. I wanted a beautiful girlfriend, and I had exactly that. I remember in 2007, in the summer of 2007, I would go to the Reading Rock Festival for about the 3rd time, but this time with a group of about 20 friends and a very, very beautiful girlfriend. I was so, so happy. And this was after the full moon, and the moon was in my 11th house of friends and networks in Leo, right? And so that's great. And the thing is, I didn't know astrology at that point, but looking back, I can see I was going to have to let go of what I had acquired. This is very hard. I had acquired all of these friends, but it was then in 2008, me and the girlfriend broke up, and it was actually that, as you see, my ascendant shifted at this point, and I was doing a lot more escapism, drinking a lot more alcohol, and because I hadn't got my spirituality. And so I'm being authentic with you, I was drinking a lot of alcohol, doing a lot of partying. You know, it wasn't really following my path. So, but we weren't off course, you can't go wrong. When we get lost, it's only to find ourselves. So when the whole chart moves, the moon's conjunct the midheaven in Leo. I was working with my friends who owned a telesales business, and that wasn't really fulfilling at all. And I always wanted to go to college and live with a group of friends. That never really happened until a few years later, when I would finally move out from my mum's house in 2011. I would also go to a festival in Belgium, punk rock music festival in Belgium. I had to go and get a job cleaning caravans, working every day, getting up at 7 a.m. just to afford it. But it was in April 2011 that I moved out of my hometown, out of my mother's house, to Brighton in England, which was a much more great development for my social arena and connecting with people. I was already following so much spiritual stuff, and most of my friends thought I was crazy because I was talking about Shambhala, I was talking about Agartha, I was talking about Hollow Earth. I love cosmology. It was cosmology that led me to astrology. And so obviously I was following great astrologers like Lada at this point. I started watching Lada and like Nadia Shah and great people like Brasher Goldsmith back in 2009 type of thing. And so I'd already gone on my astrology journey a little bit, but I wasn't studying astrology. I hadn't bought my first astrology book until 2012. And so this was the beginning of my journey then. And the moon goes into the 12th house. I'm letting go of old perspectives and letting go of the way that I used to feel seen by others because I was going on my spiritual path. I started my YouTube channel in 2011. And so I started making videos and self-loving myself and healing my biggest fears with regards to food and diet, which had been a self-sabotaging habit I had all my life, Venus and Scorpio in the second house, natal chart. And so we recognize as well, by the way, this is a different chart ruler, Mars, and at this point, since the ascendant changes the chart ruler, or even Pluto, as you can see, which is right by the ascendant. And so anyway, the moon goes over its own south node, 2014. At the end of 2014, I had become so alienated from my social group because none of them were interested in astrology that I decided to move back home, back from the town, after 4 years, back from the city, back to living with my mum in January. The moon goes back into the first house. Moon is mother, moon is home, conjunct the ascendant and Pluto. And I would spend time developing my work as an astrologer and spirituality. Started to make new moon and full moon videos every 2 weeks around this time and really developing my craft. I didn't start doing astrology readings until 2016, 17. 17 professionally, 16 privately. And so here you go. You can see that this was actually when I discovered the progress chart reading as the moon reaches its third quarter waning phase of the cycle that began when my parents got divorced at age 6. The first quarter was when I returned to society after agoraphobia. The full moon was the year after my father died, and I was going to have to start letting go of my whole social sphere, letting go of whatever had nurtured me and whatever I'd felt close to emotionally. And so now the moon goes into water sign of Scorpio. Oh, let's go back a little bit. Look at that. I missed it. The sun went, as the moon goes into the 12th house in 2013, the sun progressed into Aquarius. As I'm becoming very infatuated with my online work, as well as the gurus that I was studying online, like Lada, like Alyssa Trahan, you know the ones. And so this is very powerful. So let's go back. The moon, so the sun is going to be in Aquarius for the next 30 years. I was born with the sun at 3 degrees of Capricorn. And so I was 30 in 2016. And this was around the time that I discovered this technique. I've been studying it for 5 years, the progress chart reading. I learned about this technique on the astrology podcast by astrologer Kelly Sturges. So shout out and congratulations and thank you to Kelly Sturges, because that's the first induction that I had to this technique, and since then I've studied it and practiced it ever since. So I discovered that I was on a waning half of a lunar cycle, and it was at the phase return of my lunar cycle, because I'm born on a third quarter moon 6 days before a new moon, 6 years before a progressed new moon. So this is very intriguing. Let's go through this. So 2017, I went to America. I had a transatlantic relationship with a woman in California, international stuff. It was very valuable for me. It was my Saturn return at this stage. I also started to work with Lada on this channel on the summer of 2017. And in 2018, I was still working with Lada at this degree and doing this capacity, which I'm doing now with you guys. And so this was a time of also me coming into the end of that transatlantic relationship. And so that was very emotional. It was only my work and love of astrology and doing readings and showing up every day, making videos, every day doing consultations that kept me going through that depression, giving me some kind of brilliant craft. When I was following my friends, going to watch their bands, going to festivals, I didn't have my own craft or sense of self, because Mars in my natal chart is in Pisces. I was following people. I have the North Node in Aries in the 7th house. I was following the leader. But it was when I found astrology and my craft, I became a leader. I led myself. I put the lead in my own pencil and started drawing out my own identity, my own mural, my own masterpiece. And you can do this too. And you empower yourself to your own skill set, your own trade. You may have already been doing it. Congratulate yourself for leading your own path. Congratulate yourself for having a sense of self, for loving yourself from the inside out. Yes, it's great to look at other people. We always look at stars. As astrologers, we actually gain reference points by looking at each other's. And we look at a gaze across as equals at one another. But we put ourselves back in pole position. We put ourselves back into the authority of being the author of our own script. And this is what this technique will do for you. And so the moon would ingress into Capricorn in 2019. And wow, this was when I was working so hard as an astrologer, very much loving what I was doing. I was really, 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 really enjoying myself, and always have been. Venus and Saturn and Uranus all together in the second house. I work online as an astrologer. This is interesting, right? And so I'm aware that I was coming towards this new moon. The moon's in its gibbous waning phase. I'd let go of all these friends. I was so isolated. If you've known me for a while, I only had 1 or 2 friends at this point. I only had connections with 1 or 2 people online at this point in my life. I would just come up and do videos every day, talk about what we were experiencing in 2020, help people through their situations, help myself through these situations. And so it was actually, interestingly enough, in 2020 in October, I moved to here, in Mexico, from England. And so if I go back to October, to very recent history, in my experience, because this is very interesting, then October I moved here and I was very intimidated and lost. I didn't know Spanish when I got here. The moon at 28 degrees of Capricorn, not visible. The moon isn't visible at this stage. It's gone beyond a crescent in its reigning phase. And so we've been here before. I was about 5 years old before this. My parents were arguing at this stage. The divorce was impending. And so the moon would go into Aquarius. What happened in December was that I had an astrologer contact me on Instagram and say, hey, we see you're an astrologer. We see you do great work. We own a hotel in Puerto Escondido in Oaxaca, the south of Mexico. If you need support, we are here for you. And they invited me to stay at their hotel. I stayed at their hotel for 3 weeks for free. It was beautiful. And not only that, because it's a very, very rich tradition here in Mexico astrology, there was astrology glyphs all over the hotel. It was magnificent. It was great. And so now, let's keep moving this forward. I came back to Tulum, where I am now, and started teaching astrology workshops in February. I was ingratiated because as soon as the moon into Aquarius, I was connected to a new society, to a new group. Hey, I'm connected back with you guys now on Astrolada's channel, right here. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share with you. This only happened a month ago in June, but look where we are now. This was 2-3 days ago, and the moon is about to get new. I'm about to have this new moon. It's absolutely a dark, dark night at this stage. All the planets underneath the horizon, just like I was born. But this is a new moon, which echoes back to when I was 6 years old and my parents got divorced. This is the end of a cycle. It was 3 weeks ago I started dating a young lady. I would love to have a family. I've always wanted a family. We're very close. In fact, the last full moon was at 3 degrees of Capricorn in a conjunction with my sun and this young lady's sun. Me and this young lady share the same degree sun. That's soulmate connection in Synastry astrology. I am intending the best. I met this woman's mother yesterday. So I have a new moon laying the banquet for the next 28 years. Maybe I'll have a family in this time. In 7 years' time, we'll have the first quarter moon. And this quarter moon will be on my descendant. The way I see myself by 2028 is going to be completely different. I intend that astrology is taught in schools. I intend that we build farms and teach astrology in the gardens while we're growing fruit and vegetables and doing yoga together with the elders and with the youngers. And I would like to be an ambassador, and I like all astrologers to be ambassadors. I like people to have the opportunity to know their chart, just like I've been sharing this with you, just like I teach people about their charts. I would like us to be empowered to use astrology within our world, and I would like to advocate for this as well as lift up other astrologers in the process. This is my ambition. This is my intention. I will have a full moon in 14 years at the top of my sky in Leo. And by the time that I've acquired whatever I acquire in this time and space, I intend that I am ready to let go of everything that I'm learning about. Now that's the value. That's the depth. And if you talk about value, you're talking about the mean ratio of something. And that is what depth is. And so thank you for joining me for this deep dive. Thank you for being present for this expose. You can invest in your progress chart reading while it's at this discounted price. You can have a 1 hour where we can look at the span of your cycle you're born into and progress you into the future. Or we can take a 2-hour deep dive and go through intrinsically, metistically, as the moon goes over and aspects each of your placements, and we pick up each part of your story that you've lived through, as well as look into what we're going to be moving through in the coming years. I am here to empower you to that service. It's my honor to be able to provide it for you. Send us your details. We are here to serve you. The information is in the description box below. Thank you for your comments. I'm inspired by your feedback. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for sharing the video with anyone who you feel may resonate. This is a great technique. The current stage of our sky is a third quarter moon. No better opportunity to get clear on the consciousness at this phase of our time, with the T-square of Mars and Venus in Leo opposing Saturn in Aquarius, squaring Uranus. This is a very powerful time to break free from old identifications and values and empower us into a new cycle of Mars and Venus and moving forward into our own future. Now, thank you for being you. I've got a consultation to attend to. I'm grateful for you. Have a fantastic selection of moments. I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheerio for now. The video is just stopping. It says it's stopping, but because we've shared so many charts, it might ask me to leave and come back. Sometimes it does it. We appreciate your patience. We've got a bonus card. Why not have a bonus card just before the video closes? And the bonus card for your moment for sticking around is the King of Swords. Shrewd. Stay in your heart. Stay in the intellectualization of your love. You've got this. I'm grateful for you. This video should end now.